Thank you, Asti. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, members, and good afternoon those that are joining us for the first time. This is the third webinar hosted by our new focus groups, and the first one hosted by the Smart Cities Focus Group. We decided to establish these new focus groups a couple of months ago, not focusing on specific business sectors, but focusing on subjects that would cross over multiple business disciplines and would therefore hopefully be attractive to a wider range of members. And the Smart Cities arena certainly covers that. There are so many disciplines that in one way or another are connected with smart cities. However, smart cities is a terminology that's often misunderstood and misused. And our intention within the focus group is to really better define what we mean by smart cities, and then try and understand how particularly UK business and our membership here in Indonesia can benefit by the development of smart cities here, the smart cities in Indonesia and possibly elsewhere. So I'm very pleased that we established this focus group. I'm equally pleased that James Allen of JLL has agreed to chair the focus group, and by doing so has immediately been able to coerce some of his friends and colleagues from across the globe to participate. For those of you that don't know James, he's currently the head of JLL Indonesia, and he came here in May 2018. He has over 20 years experience in the real estate sector, having worked in Indonesia, China, and United Kingdom. He was in China for many years, and he and I were friends in Shanghai for probably about 10 years. Since joining JLL in 2008, he has held a range of increasingly senior roles in the China business before moving here, advising multinational tenants and landlords. James' expertise covers marketing consultancy of major commercial developments, tenant representation, and investment transactions. And therefore, clearly, he's in a business sector that one way or another is connecting with the smart cities concept almost on a daily basis. So James, what I'd like to do is to hand over to you, and please guide us through this webinar. I'm very grateful for your participation, and I look forward to participating in the Q&A, as do I hope many of the people listening. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ainsley, and indeed, thank you very much for the opportunity. We set up this focus group around 6 weeks ago, and a lot of the members of that focus group are on this call, and before we start, I'd like to thank them very much for getting this started on our first webinar. We intend to have a series of webinars on smart cities. I mean, it's a topic that's going to roll on, and as Ainsley alluded to, it does cross over in many different sectors and disciplines, which we will hopefully dive into as we have a deeper dive on what smart city means and what businesses that brings together. Delighted to have Jeremy Kelly, who is a real authority on this and has done many presentations globally for JLL clients around not just Asia Pacific, but as I said, globally, and to have his expertise on that. So it's great to start the first one really with a more general overview. What is a smart city? What are the ingredients that are going in to make a smart city? And then we can have a deeper dive of those aspects going off. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over from Jeremy, who is currently based in the UK in our London office, to run us through the presentation. After that, we will have a Q&A, and on the panel will obviously be Rama from Glue as well. So please keep your questions coming in, and I can certainly we can discuss those after the presentation in about 30 minutes. So Jeremy, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to present today. And now, if the smart technology works, then I will try to share my screen in the first instance. So bear with me 1 second. So hopefully you can all see my screen in front of you. I mean, we do hear so much about smart cities, about smartness, and we're going to hear a little bit more about it today, because the number of governments across the globe that are declaring their intention to make their cities smart is is exponentially growing. But equally, there's a lot of hype out there about the role and characteristics of smart cities, and a heightened expectation of the benefits that smart city solutions can bring. And as Ainsley highlighted at the beginning, there's certainly the term smart cities has become very much overused, and some would say almost flabby, such that some urbanists are now talking about urban tech and intelligent cities and hyper-connected cities rather than smart cities. But at the end of the day, we're kind of talking about the same thing. And added to the mix, the COVID-19 pandemic is resulting in fast-track digitization with the mass adoption of home working across the globe and the requirement for more timely data on health and mobility and space usage. It's kind of boosted the technology revolution. And it's also created an additional sense of urgency to solve some of the problems of our cities through technology. So I'm just going to take you through a few slides, the rise of the smart city from a distinctly real estate perspective, and we'll explore the opportunities and challenges of rolling out smart cities and drawing on the experience of several case studies across the globe. And as I said, it is a real estate perspective. I'm not a technologist, and our aim is really to throw a bit of fresh light on the role that real estate can play in acting as the glue, in fact, in creating truly scalable and successful smart solutions for its citizens and for businesses and for the environment. Now, before I dive into describing smart cities, I just think it was worth spending 2 or 3 minutes on a broader perspective about city futures and where smart cities sit in this. Because as real estate advisors, JLL's mantra is that real estate activity and performance is not just a consequence of city success, but can be a real driver, an active contributor in driving successful cities and creating more sustainable and resilient and healthy urban environments. And so we at JLL have been running our cities research program, which I lead for the past 2 decades, to understand city competitiveness and city success and the intersection with real estate. And I think there's probably at no time during the last 2 decades have our cities been facing such a great challenge, not only from the immediate consequences of COVID-19, but also the huge pressures for us all now to move to a low carbon environment, to respond to climate change and the impacts that has had, to deal with rapid economic change and shifting quality of life expectations and social expectations. And so in trying to answer the question about the future of cities, we keep coming back to the framework that we developed before COVID, which is about sort of three layers that we can look at cities. So we talk about the digital city, which is, so we're seeing the fast-track digitization of cities and the stimulus that technology is giving to innovation and the imperative to become smart. So this is what we're talking about today. But very much linked to that is the whole point about what we call the responsible city. The greater awareness of the fragility of our society and our environment means that cities are having to double down on becoming more sustainable and inclusive. And so real estate is having to be more energy efficient, low carbon, more resilient and good for the health. And then the third dimension is what we call the glocal city. And it's this tension between globalization and localization. Because while global connectivity remains important, particularly in services, certainly COVID has really brought the whole issue of local self-sufficiency rising up the agenda in terms of local resources and production and supply chain. And that also has implications for how smart cities are evolving. You know, how do they become more localized and self-sufficient? And so cities need to be increasingly innovative. They need to be adaptable to each new wave of change. underpinned by strong city governance. And it's kind of a new world where agility and flexibility are more important than traditional measures of measuring the success of a city. We used to use GDP growth as the litmus test of how successful a city is. But now there's a whole new language that we're having to measure cities on livability, on well-being, on resilience, on affordability, on brand and diversity, and even things like biodiversity and mindfulness, the sort of the health and mental health of a population. And we have clients now, big hairy investor clients, who have been asking us questions about city biodiversity and mindfulness. So how rapid the conversation is evolving. And so many cities, quite understandably, are looking to technology and data to help sort of move them through all these challenges. They're investing in smart city technologies to help them meet the challenges of absorbing growth and improving the lives of its citizens. And so the number of governments declaring their intention to be smart in the pipeline is actually really significant. I mean, China has more than 500 smart cities in the pipeline. India, which I'll mention in a moment, has more than 100. And then we have the smart nation Singapore, Smart Taipei, New Tokyo, New Tomorrow, and many others with impressive logos and very bold aspirations. And our latest calculation is that there are more than 1,000 smart city initiatives around the globe. And this is based on a pretty tight definition of smart cities because, as Ainsley said, the definitions of smart cities are very flabby. And so we're defining it as one where policies and strategies that leverage technology and data deliver 4 things: an improvement to the quality of life, services, and inclusiveness of its citizens. So number 1, it's about citizens. Secondly, it's to drive efficiency and improve decision-making for government. So it's about improving the efficiency of government services. Thirdly, it's about creating transparent, efficient, and competitive environment for businesses. So it's boosting business competitiveness. And crucially, and increasingly importantly, it's about creating resilience and helping deliver a more sustainable, low-carbon economy. And obviously, the key words here are about data and technology, but even some are now arguing that being smart doesn't necessarily involve a digital solution. It can actually be quite low-tech. And so the emphasis is shifting now about smart decisions, not necessarily just about technology, which makes defining a smart city even more complicated. And various organizations have attempted to make sense of the world of smart cities by ranking the world's leading smart cities. And here are just a few examples. And what strikes me when creating this slide was, with a few exceptions, there really is a lack of consensus on which cities make the top list. It's a bit of a random walk here. And I think it's a reflection on the very fuzziness of smartness. The fact that many of these indices are often measuring policy and aspiration rather than the results and outcomes. And some actually are based on self-evaluation, which we sort of know what that often brings. But I think there are 3 cities that do continually come back in the conversation about smart cities, and that's Singapore, Dubai, and Barcelona. And just a few seconds on each of those. I mean, I think the one city that truly does lead the pack is Singapore. It's progressing its Smart Nation initiative, which was launched back in 2014. And it's since been recognized as one of the world's smartest cities. In fact, it's probably kind of the poster child of the smart city. And unlike many other countries where innovation and technology have been driven by the private sector, I think in Singapore, the government are clearly setting the pace. It's a highly centralized approach, benefiting from being a city-state, so it doesn't have those multiple layers of of government, which can be the downfall of many smart city initiatives. And it's a strategy that's underpinned by an increasingly omnipresent digital platform, digital sensors, a digital identity. So it's decidedly technology oriented and involves perhaps a greater acceptance of surveillance and data sharing than other cities may tolerate. And it's very broad ranging in scope, from urban living to transport to health to government services to business startups and the creation of smart districts. And there's some digital platforms relating to real estate, but there isn't a heavy emphasis in Singapore on the engagement with the real estate sector. Dubai is another city with a very strong smart city ambition. It also benefits from effectively being a city state, and its infrastructure is still being built out. So it has the advantage it can build in smart city solutions from the very start. And it's less about retrofitting existing cities, which is the challenge of, again, of many smart city solutions. And so the Smart Dubai office has launched numerous initiatives in partnership with the government and the private sector. And many of these initiatives aim to provide seamless and efficient services to the public and emphasize digitization to move to a cashless and paperless society. Dubai Data, which is about the opening and sharing of public and private sector, of city data for the public and private sector, is a promising initiative, as is the digital twin, which they're creating. And they've also been pioneering in the deployment of blockchain. Although I'm a little bit more ambivalent about their initiative to sort of digitize happiness with the creation of their online happiness index. But there does seem to be a greater role in Dubai in terms of the active participation of real estate through the Dubai Land Department. And there are various real estate initiatives which bring in real estate into the equation of how we roll out smart cities. The third, I think, exemplar example is Barcelona, which has relentlessly pursued a goal to be a digital city, and it has contributed to its reinvention. I won't go into detail, but what are they doing differently from, say, Singapore or Dubai? I mean, it's certainly a test bed for smart projects relating to the Internet of Things. They have a big emphasis on brand and using events and congresses to sort of boost their halo effect of being smart with smart city conferences. And they also invested heavily in what's called the 22@ Innovation District, which has become the poster child of an innovation district, and then has enabled the sort of the acupuncture of focusing on a particular district to punch above its weight as an innovation economy. But here it's very much about citizen engagement. And I think the point that they are moving towards is that it doesn't have to be high tech. It can be about intelligent urban planning. So there are moves to create super blocks of pedestrian friendly areas. There's a major move to preserve biodiversity and green spaces. And it's probably a more human-centric approach that emphasizes smart decisions and less on the technology itself. India also, I think, worth mentioning because of its flagship India Smart Cities project, which was launched 5 years ago now, to tackle urban problems. And it does have parallels with how smart cities are evolving in Southeast Asia. And the objective is to implement smart solutions across 100 cities across India. And I think the initiative does highlight sort of the twin challenges, on the one hand, of retrofitting existing cities, so putting in smart city solutions to an existing fabric, and also trying to deploy smart solutions across the entire city. And so there's lots of criticism of it. Progress has been slow. There's a lack of funding, a lack of private participation. So it's been too reliant on central government grants for sources of funds. And also there's been a kind of a lack of basic infrastructure and amenities, which means that they are trying to run before they can walk, in the sense that they're trying to impose smart city solutions, often on in situations where there isn't the basic infrastructure. So, you know, I think certainly the challenges of retrofitting is the reason why often a lot of attention is focused on some of the more ambitious new smart cities that are coming from greenfield, brownfield, sandfield sites, often in the Middle East, you know, from Neom in Saudi Arabia to Masdar in Abu Dhabi to Lusail in Qatar. But even some of these have perhaps fallen short of original plans. Masdar, for example, I think, may be corrected, but I think it's only about sort of 10% developed so far. And it's here where some of the more outlandish sort of smart solutions are across these new smart cities, rather than Masdar specifically, sorry, where some of the more outlandish smart solutions are often touted. You know, artificial moons based on drones, sort of flying taxis, robotic maids, sort of holographic teachers. So, and in a way, it's interesting. It's a bit of a distraction, because I think the real challenge for us all is about how we truly retrofit our existing cities, rather than perhaps be looking at these new smart cities that often, actually, at the end of the day, don't always deliver what they promised from at the beginning. And why is that? Because I think while there are more than 1,000 smart cities announced, we reckon that probably only about half a dozen to a dozen where there are concrete plans for truly scalable implementation, because there's a real challenge with scalability. Cities are really struggling to identify cases to deploy and then scale them up, and funding and bureaucracy have often been a real stumbling block, because cities are, as we all know, are very large and complex ecosystems, and so smart solutions can only be successful if there is the time and the resource devoted to it. Secondly, I think it's because initiatives are overly focused on technology. There seems to be a real appetite to show off the latest technology, sort of me too and better sort of policy, rather than to roll out existing technologies. And so I think vendors and governments should be looking more about how to ultimately service the ultimate stakeholder, which is the citizen. And thirdly, it's behavioral. Change is not easy. There is a tendency to want to prove that smart city solutions work from day one, but it does take time. And we need to sort of recognize that it does take time for these to build in impetus. And also, I think it's the physical space does seem to be overlooked. You know, the acknowledgement of the role that real estate can play. Buildings and how we use space is at the very heart of cities, and so we believe that to truly recognize the promise of a proper smart city, we need to acknowledge that the role that real estate can play in rolling out smart cities. Which brings me to a sort of related topic of prop tech, which is kind of very entwined in the whole concept of smart cities. You know, the real estate industry is in the midst of a technological leap, although it's historically been a bit of a laggard when it comes to technology. I think it's certainly the real estate industry is at a tipping point with the rapid growth of prop tech, and the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic could certainly help to fast track digitization and stimulate innovation in the use of technology in buildings, due to the need for more accurate and just-in-time data relating to health and mobility and space usage and energy efficiency. And so I think prop tech offers some tangible near-term solutions at all stages in the process of real estate, from construction to management. And I think through PropTech, real estate could really bridge the gap between the technologists on the one side and the governments and citizens on the other, for smart cities to be a functioning, meaningful and successful reality. And so how could real estate make a difference? I'll just be very quick here. Number one is about managing and optimizing spaces. Technologies like predictive maintenance, energy management, environmental sensors can drive operational efficiency, lower energy costs, reduce asset downtime, increase the useful life of assets, ensure a healthy, comfortable and safe workplace, as well as enhancing business performance and employee productivity, and improve transparency, which is key to the success of a city going forward, as our recently launched Transparency Index has highlighted. And critically, it can drive the sustainability agenda, with 40% of carbon emissions across the globe coming from real estate. Then technology in buildings can help deliver low carbon economy in terms of potential energy savings, more efficient use of resources to support building and site operations, and increase the lifespan of better maintained assets. So we're embracing more the circular economy. I think it's also important about how smart buildings can be a contributor to enhancing inclusiveness. And I think that brings back to that point about the real opportunity for a more human-centric approach to smart city development, which is more inclusive in terms of the demographics, in terms of the social stratus, etc. And also through redefining smart districts. So combining urban planning, placemaking, and digitization, we can really build these digitally enabled districts with new engines of economic growth. And because of issues of scalability, then urbanists are often looking to sort of district level approaches, from Songdo International Business District to Punggol Digital District in Singapore. These are providing the acupuncture of smart districts within cities. The Northern European cases on the right-hand side tend to be more organic. It's a more localized approach. It's more about living labs and community participation, with a strong emphasis on sustainability and an emphasis on public and private partnerships. And just one or two more slides, because I just wanted to bring in that funding is often one of the big issues in smart cities and districts. And so many smart city initiatives are being driven by domestic tech giants, led by the opportunity to develop and test new technologies in a real-time live environment. So we have Tencent in Shenzhen, Alibaba in Hangzhou, illustrating the rise of China's cities as hotbeds of smart city innovation. But likewise, Toyota, Panasonic in the greater Tokyo area, Siemens in Berlin are also experimenting with smart cities. But big tech involvement in smart cities can backfire, as we've seen with Alphabet and Google, and high-profile plans for Toronto for their Quayside, which was effectively scuppered at the end of the day. Although they're using COVID as a reason, I think it's probably scuppered by I think it's fair to say, a lack of community engagement. And so, final reflection on my final slide. I think, the message, the call to action I have, I think, that we can perhaps develop in subsequent conversations is that real estate is really pivotal to a successful smart city. We already have many of the solutions and tools today, so it's not necessarily about inventing new ones and looking to artificial intelligence or AVs. It's more or less about how we can better scale and deliver some of the existing technologies. And I think it's also really important to emphasize that smart cities is a people and a sustainability issue. It's not a technology issue. To reach their potential, I think smart cities have not been paying enough attention to the needs and experiences of its cities and how it can be used to deliver a low carbon, resilient economy. And as I said in my introduction, our mantra is about real estate being the heartbeat of a city. It can be the connector between the people on the one side and the technologies on the other side. And I think if the real estate industry has a duty actually to realize that some of the best smart city solutions sit within its domain in terms of delivering tangible benefits by creating networks of hyper-connected buildings. So a bit of a call to action. I think that the industry does need to lead by example with greater engagement across the globe to engage with industry, to work closely to identify smart solutions where the built environment can improve communities, businesses, and in the environment. So with that, and apologies for a very rapid counter to the world of smart cities, I will hand back to James and remind everyone to submit any questions. We'd welcome the input and conversation. James.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Yeah, covered a lot of ground there. It's a very big topic, and I think that gives us some great conversation starting points based on that. If you could stay on for the panel, I'd be very grateful. And before we sort of open up with some Q&A, and we've got a lot of great questions coming through, so thank you everybody and keep them coming. If I could just pass over to Rama just to introduce himself and Glue and just really touch on the technology ecosystems, their most important features they've been working with. And if you could just sort of try and bring this back to Jakarta and just talk about your experiences on some of that technology you've been putting into the system and how it's been partnering with both public and private entities in Jakarta, that'd be fantastic. So Rama, if I just pass over to you just for some introductions, some comments, and then we get into the Q&A.
Right. Thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting Clue to this webinar. My name is Rama. I am the founder and CEO of Clue. Clue, we are very focused on the smart city solutions. We provide a smart city platform where within that platform, there is a bunch of solutions such as citizen participations, AI, there's IoT technologies, command center dashboard, as well as mobile workforce. Maybe go back a little, Anthony, to the why Clue was born. Actually, the next slide. Sorry. So okay, it's okay. Just yeah, this one. So this is the reason why we actually made Clue. Back in 2011, this is what usually happened in the middle of Jakarta. Every rainy season is always, the implication is always flooded. We are considered as the #1 traffic congested city in the world, Jakarta, and also it's for most polluted city in the world as well. A lot of other problems, a lot of social problems that is impacting the citizens. And whenever there is issues back in the days, people complain, but nobody can respond. Right? We Indonesians, we love to complain. So we complain over anything. On Twitter, on Facebook, wherever we can, we complain, but nobody can respond that, right? So what we thought back in the days in 2014 was to build a mobile app that allowed citizens to report problems using geofencing, as well as multimedia, such as video and pictures and voice notes and so on. Within 2 seconds, they can report right away, and the field officers or the field workers on the field will capture the reports, and they can acknowledge those reports and finish it, right? So it's kind of like Grab and Grab driver, or like Gojek and Gojek driver, where someone orders something and the driver will respond to the problems, right? And whenever there's someone who actually report that and be responded by the officials we're talking about police officers, transportation divisions, sanitation divisions, and so on, the citizens will get notifications and then they can give a rating. So is it like 1 star or 5 stars, and things like that. So we implemented Clue alongside with the command center platform, and Jakarta Smart City was born in end of 2014. So the next 3 years, we've managed to reduce floods, about 80% of floods. So this is the use case. Reduce a bunch of problems, capture illegal, capture drug dealers, capture criminal activities, reduce extortions. I think a lot of social impacts due to this, because we believe that citizens is the main source of information regarding all of the problems that's happening in the city. If you see on the screen, there is a command center where it tells there's like red, yellow, and green. So the red place marks, we call it, it's problems that has not been finished. Yellow ones is the one that being processed by the officers, and the green ones are the one that has been completed with photo evidence. So fast forward from 2015, today we have evolved more than only citizen reporting platform, but we also have empowered a lot of CCTVs at the moment. So we empowered existing CCTVs with AIs, because we believe citizens can report a lot of problems, right? But in the middle of the night, whenever there's issues, citizens are asleep. So CCTVs are the ones who's actually capturing these issues as well, while citizens are not there. So we have two sources of information, whether it is from citizens or whether it is from video analytic AI from the CCTV. So bunch of use cases for the CCTV. There is facial recognition, illegal parking detections, people counting, jaywalking detection, speeding. So in Indonesia, there is so many problems regarding mobility, right? So we see these problems as opportunities to actually solve these issues regarding either safety and security or is it mobility. There is so many use cases in my head that's actually happening, but one of them that is also important is we help the ASEAN Games 2018 to secure the venue. So we collaborate with the National Police Force. I think there's a slide about it. Anthony, please, if you may. Yes, so we collaborated with the National Police Force to secure the ASEAN Games 2018 event in 3 provinces at that time of Jakarta. There is West Java as well as South Sumatra. We launch all of our ecosystem of solutions. So there's mobile workforce, citizen participations, video analytic, call center, command center platform, and so on. So this helps reduce a lot of or anticipate criminal activities and other safety and security issues around the premises. We also work with townships or real estate developers. So in Indonesia, we work with Sinar Masland, Alam Sutra, we work with Intiland, Agung Sedayu, and so on. So the giant real estate developers in Indonesia, where we deploy a bunch of AI and IoT solutions to automate a bunch of things, either boom gate for the townships, or it is for capturing thermal sensors for COVID-19 preventions and more. Yes. So there's a lot of use cases, but at the end of the day, when you're talking about smart city, it is very important. I agree with James earlier that, Jeremy earlier, that not a lot of people are actually aware of the importance of smart city. The urbanization issues that is increasing at an alarming rate until, I think right now it's about 45% in Indonesia, but by 2050 it's about 70%. That means more people will live in cities. This means more problems will happen. The urbanization issues will happen again. So we need to maintain these issues by having technologies, by empowering the citizens, by anticipating a lot of things using infrastructure as well as technology. So I believe that other solutions or more solutions should be involved in building the city, empowering the citizens and more. And we should we should be able to also help more cities in Indonesia. Right now, we have helped more than 60 cities at the moment out of 512. So there's a lot of homework to actually capture, to do until we completed all of the cities in Indonesia and help our government to build not only a smart city, but a smart nation. I think that's just a little bit of clue. If you have any questions, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So we've got a lot of questions that come through. Quite a few of the questions are really directed about security and safety. And, you know, it's basically really questions for both Rama and for Jeremy. You know, some of the questions I'll just give you, many people view smart cities to be safer and more secure places. In your view, does safety and security fill in this concept? Also talks about in terms of smart cities, in lots of talk about technology and command centers in briefing, COVID and recent civil unrest in the US and the need for physical security. How far can tech go to replace security and personnel? I guess, you know, safety now sort of incorporates sort of a COVID scenario. Jeremy, start with you, if I may. Are you seeing a lot of activity on this becoming a major factor in a smart city in terms of the safety and security of that city and of course its citizens?
It's certainly an element to one of the factors that is driving smart city solutions. I mean, there are various levels that smart cities can respond to citizens. You know, it can be just about at one level, it can be about improving efficiency, and so it just generally makes life easier. To at the other end, it's about just making sure that its citizens have got some basic quality of life, and a key part of that is about security and safety. And so we are seeing it rolled out far more to address the whole issue of safety, and that, as you say, that bleeds into the conversations about COVID and being able to monitor citizens for their health and mobility. So I see that as growing, but often the challenge is the conflict with the sort of surveillance and how far do you go to with regards to protecting your citizens without therefore compromising on their freedoms. And attitudes are very different in different countries. You have in the US, which is, you know, there's a sort of certainly a backlash to this sort of monitoring, whereas in other countries, you know, there's greater acceptance of having surveillance that enables crime and safety to be reduced and safety to be protected.
Yeah. So just before I move on to Rama, I mean, one other question that's coming up quite a lot is, you know, how do you get, you know, the needle moving, you know, given the financial costs involved in, you know, getting, and indeed the timeline, getting a city, you know, to increase its benchmark up the indexes for a smart city. You know, obviously Indonesia, you know, is looking to do a new capital, but there's going to be some challenges in terms of budget, given a lot of governments, including Indonesian government, has obviously had to spend a lot of those resources on COVID. Is there any key things you've seen from those three cities that you highlighted, Singapore, Dubai, Barcelona, and any other cities, on how they got going? I mean, is it totally driven by the government agenda, or, you know, what's the interaction between the private sector and the government sector? Any comments on that I think would be very useful.
Is it to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So because I didn't highlight the Dubai.
So Jeremy, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Rama, shall I kick off?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's no surprise that the examples that I have cited, Singapore and Dubai, and to a lesser degree Barcelona, they have have had good access to funds, to central government funds. And I think the real stumbling block here is the greater, and which is where India has struggled, I think. I might be corrected on that. Is certainly about being able to bring in the private sector into the conversation, into the initiative more explicitly. So it's not driven by pure government funds. And I'm actually quite positive in that regard, because I think that there's a sort of mutual benefit in the private sector and public sector to get this right. And investors, I mean, from a real estate perspective, investors and developers and corporates, are demanding more energy efficient, healthy, safe environments with greater digital connectivity. So, on the one hand, the governments are looking for that, but so are the private sector. So somehow there should be a way to be able to bring the two together. And data, it's also releasing or creating a huge amount of data. And so there's also a potential to monetize data and to use that to help fund some of the smart city infrastructure. Yeah, it's the finance is one of the biggest challenges. Rama, anything to add?
Yeah, in Indonesia, during this COVID-19, a lot of the budget, most of the budget are allocated for COVID-19. But it does, well, if you think about it, COVID-19 it happens in most of the most urbanized cities, right? So it's either Jakarta is the most cases, Surabaya, and so on, because there's more density over there. Where the budget allocations for the government is more on the surveillance side. So it really still aligned to accelerate the smart city implementations. So there is budget for like thermal cameras, which includes the cameras to capture people counting, facial recognition, things like that. There is budgets for citizen participation, for people reporting regarding non-social distancing citizens or any other violations for the lockdowns. So even though the budget is allocated for COVID, but it's still available for smart city projects. But I know what you're talking about regarding the new capital as well. Unfortunately, I think I've heard that it's going to be delayed. It's not going to be discussed this year, even though last year we were discussing about it quite intensively. But I know that there's investors regarding the new capital. I think there's news about it published about that SoftBank will be investing on the new capital city, but I don't know what happened right now. But yeah, mostly from the national budget as well as investors from abroad. So, but during this COVID-19, it doesn't really affect on the smart city development in most cities in Indonesia, because it only accelerate the consciousness of building a smart city, because they need to increase the surveillance on the city.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So questions for really for both parties, but what opportunities do we think there are for British companies, prop tech companies, of the like, having an opportunity to come in and share their experiences, and indeed opportunity for them to help get this, accelerate this project and the dream of Jakarta becoming a smart city?
Yeah. I think the best way is to go through, so for instance, right now we have deployed our solutions in more than 60 cities around Indonesia, right? We built a platform. And within that platform, we also collaborate with other companies. So whenever there's like IoT devices regarding smart lights or smart bin or any other of IoT devices or AI capabilities, we integrate it into our platform. I think the easiest way is to integrate through an existing partners that is already working with the city itself, then knocking on the door and then say, hey, yeah, we want to help the city or things like that. Because it's going to be more difficult, especially for foreign vendors or companies to be able to do that, unless it's an CSR. But yeah, I think that's my personal opinion. That's what actually works so far. That's why we are also opening. Well, we are also open for collaborations to actually work with other companies that is outside of Indonesia that already implemented smart city solutions outside of Indonesia that has the capability to help our country as well to be better.
Okay. If I could add, James, that I think you may remember I did show one slide which showed how London and the UK, or London specifically, is amongst the leading location in terms of prop tech innovation. And so I think often the world is looking to the UK for some of the latest innovations when it comes to prop tech, smart city technologies. I would probably, though, be a bit more provocative and think about really what the solutions are, rather than talking about the smart technologies in themselves, because I think that's where the emphasis should be, and it should be on how we can use technology to make lives better, to improve quality of life, to tackle issues with security, to look at how we can build resilience and move to a low carbon economy. And so there are lots of sort of specific areas that kind of that touch we should be looking at that are embraced by the whole concept of smart cities. So I think it's a question partly of breaking it down into particular areas.
Yeah, it's good. I did quite a few questions as well on. It's interesting in terms of smart cities, and how COVID to a large degree is making people think about whether they want to live in a city. Full stop. So, in your view, is this going to accelerate smart cities on the agenda for local governments, both in Indonesia and globally, to entice people to come, to want to live and stay in the cities?
I mean, if I could sort of have a go at that, I mean, I don't really subscribe to this view that we're seeing that COVID is threatening existence in our cities. I think I suspect most of our cities will go through some real challenges over the next couple of years, but they'll come back. Most will come back more resilient and with new energy and purpose. And so over time, we've seen how resilient cities can be. But having said that, I think you're right, James. They need to draw on, they need to be thinking more in terms of how they can use digitization to make their city more attractive. They need to be thinking more about responsibility. They need to be thinking more about sort of creating self-sufficiency. So yeah, smartness is one of the sort of pieces of armory that cities will need to re-inject new energy into our cities as we move out of this pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You think of all, COVID, it's all about space now, isn't it? You need to have space when you're traveling. You need to have space in your office. So, I'm a big believer that smart technology will come into cities and make moving around a city much more productive, and allow people, and because of that productivity and the way it's organized, it will create more space and make it a more pleasant experience. So almost the COVID could accelerate that, which I think will personally be a great thing. And I firmly believe in you. I don't think this is the end of the city at all. People live in cities for many reasons. It's not just work. It's a combination of those. Just I'm conscious of time. We've got a few more minutes left for a few questions before I pass over to Chris for some closing comments. Another one here: significant both Singapore and Dubai are regional financial centres, therefore have the clout to do what they've done. Obviously, Singapore benefits from a very strong centralized government that has a very strong mandate, and it's a smaller country with a lot of resources. Now, given that's a neighbour of Jakarta, one would think that there will be opportunities for those who've prospered from being part of that journey in Singapore, leaning over into Indonesia and Jakarta and being part of that solution. Have you seen a lot of the same companies move around those smart cities? Is it the same companies, or they tend to be more domestic? I appreciate you've done some examples, Jeremy, but just be interested if there's a common denominator in all of those smart city solutions appearing on the global agenda.
Difficult to answer directly, but what I would say is that there's a tendency amongst each of these smart cities to go down their own route and use. And so whilst there may be some big players that are involved in some smart city initiatives, I've got a sense that at the moment there's a lot of reinventing the wheels, and that there's not. I think there's one question about how sort of software companies get involved, and somehow there needs to be we need to come together in terms of the networks of smart cities to learn from each other and I still don't think that's happening sufficiently. It's a bit competitive, and at this moment, and so one city is trying to sort of build its smart city capability as a competitive advantage. But I do think the industry will need to mature and to learn from each other as we build out our smart cities into other locations like India and Indonesia. But I'm afraid I don't have specific examples.
Yeah, it was a bit of a general question. I appreciate it. Rama, just any closing comments from you before I pass over to Chris? Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, Indonesia, we are very focused right now on smart city development. I think since last year, we have a mission to build 100 smart cities by 2025 or 2023, I forgot. But the problem is the solutions that we have right now in Indonesia is not enough. We need more companies to actually be more active in the smart city space. Therefore, if there is, there are solutions that have been used in other countries that want to venture into Indonesia, we are open to collaborate as well to introduce to the cities that we have in Indonesia and make the city better. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, look, before I pass over to Chris, just a personal thank you from me to Jeremy and Rama. Fantastic. I did throw out some pretty broad questions, and thank you for your very smart answers and great presentations. And really delighted and honoured to have you on this webinar. So I should pass over to Chris to close out. And thank you very much for your questions, everybody. And I will discuss with the focus group on the next agenda, and we're going to definitely have a deeper dive on some of these topics we've discussed today. So thank you very much for your attendance. Over to you, Chris.
And thank you very much, James. A brilliant first Smart Cities webinar, and looking forward to the subsequent ones. Just a few announcements for everybody. In terms of the member focus groups, what you've just seen now, as Ainsley had mentioned earlier, this is the Smart Cities focus group. There are two others: climate change, human capital, and education. These are strictly for members only. If you'd like to join BritCham to be able to participate in any or two or all of these, you're very welcome to do so, and there's a particular incentive on right now. In addition, yesterday we launched our International Chambers Business Confidence Index. It's the 7th, created and managed by BritCham in partnership with Eurocham. If you are a foreign resident working with a PT or an exec with a foreign company, and you haven't received your invitation to participate in this survey, please do ask one of our team, and we will be happy to send you a generic link. Excuse me. Yeah,
Yes.
I'd just like to thank once again James and the panel that he's put together, Rama, Jeremy, Asti and my Britcham team as well. But of course, these are only worthwhile if we're delivering some strong messages, some great information, and doing some wonderful sharing. So thank you all for joining us. Keep an eye on our notifications. Thank you. Good afternoon from Jakarta. Good morning if you're there are a few people over there in the UK. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.